I think it's important to understand the socio-political activity that was happening at the time. The United States had a lot of multinational corporations at the time that were in need of bauxite, which is an aluminum ore used to create aluminum products. So you had the Alcoas and other big corporations that needed a lot of this bauxite ore. And the Caribbean happened to be the place where they could mine a lot of this ore in a very inexpensive way, paying pretty low wages to people on those islands. 60% of their ore was coming from the Caribbean islands, and a majority of that was coming from Jamaica. So what happened was a new prime minister, Prime Minister Manley, came in, and his party was called the PNP, and it was a party that was really moving towards socialism and away from capitalism. And he had been involved in the Bauxite Union in Jamaica as a young man. So when he took over, he made some moves to nationalize it and basically take it away from these corporations, or at least make them pay a lot more. First thing they did was they had to give up 51% ownership of these mines back to Jamaica. And then later the taxes went up on them and other such things. So that, of course, that coupled with the fact that Prime Minister Manley was visiting with Castro and having Castro advisors come over from Cuba, we began to fear as a country that Jamaica was heading towards communism. And if that was the case too, these corporations would ultimately lose their ability to mine this, nearby inexpensive ore. So right. They lobbied Washington. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger went over there. He tried to offer financial aid to Jamaica and other such exchanges in consideration for the prime minister to basically move away from democratic socialism and back towards capitalism. It didn't work. Manley sent him home. Later, within a month, the United States discontinued any approval of loans to Jamaica. And then suddenly the ambassador's office, which only had a U.S. ambassador in Jamaica and his secretary, suddenly had 7 new diplomats that joined them. And it turns out they were all CIA operatives. So their job was to basically disrupt the country and try to create so much violence and havoc in Jamaica that Manley would lose the next election to the more conservative candidate that the United States supported at the time, and his name was Edward Siega. And so these two groups or gangs, as you mentioned, the JLP, which was Siega, and the PNP, all started to battle, and the CIA was bringing weapons into Jamaica, smuggling them in and getting them to the JLP. And so it became a very violent clash between these groups over politics.
And were they both, the JLP and Michael Manley's PNP, were they both courting Bob Marley because obviously he was a very popular figure, hugely popular in Jamaica? Were they both courting him for his influence?
Well, initially, and really since he had grown up, Bob Marley had friends in both of those political groups. And although he probably leaned a little bit towards Prime Minister Manley, publicly, he always remained neutral. And in 1976, when he saw all this violence taking place, he felt, and he was aware of he was aware that the CIA was trying to disrupt Jamaica. He felt that the best way to deal with that is to put on a peaceful concert, which was ultimately called Smile Jamaica. And the reason why I believe Marley knew about the CIA is because he actually recorded a song that year that basically spoke to we don't want no CIA telling Rasta what to do, that type of thing.
Right.
And yeah, so it was fun because I was able to dig up previously classified documents to discover really what was going on behind the scenes with our government and how they were trying to manipulate the next election.
Let me ask you, how difficult was that to do? I mean, you're doing FOIA requests, I guess, Freedom of Information Act requests. Were you getting cooperation, or were you getting back a lot of heavily redacted documents?
I got no cooperation. I wrote a letter to, first of all, I discovered that those documents had been declassified 10 years before I started to request them. So the first time I sent off a FOIA letter, it was to the Obama administration. And their letter back to me said, we can neither confirm nor deny whether we have any documents that relate to Bob Marley and the CIA, which means we have them and you can't have them. You can sue us. So I'm not going to waste time doing that. Then when time and money, it could have been, I'd still be in litigation over that. So then when Donald Trump came into power as president, I wrote another FOIA request. I got back the exact same letter from his administration. We can neither confirm nor deny whether we have Bob Marley CIA records. So I thought that was interesting. Two different political parties in the U.S. Neither one would give me documents that are supposed to be available to the public. So I then happened to have an opportunity to interview Colonel Oliver North, who had been the National Security Advisor under Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, before I asked him about those records, I asked him if he'd had an opportunity to talk to President Ford, who was president at the time all this CIA stuff was going on. And he did have that opportunity. And I said, well, why is it that I can't get these records? And he said, both presidents that you've written off to, both administrations should have given you those records. And, we'll take a lot of time and money to sue them. But he said, have you heard of this website called WikiLeaks? And I laughed and said, yes, I have. And he said, the records are there. You'll find them. And so that's how I was able to get records that our own government should have released to me by law because they had been declassified. And so it was a fun story.
And what did the WikiLeaks documents reveal about the CIA's concern, particularly about Bob Marley? Did they have a big file on Marley?
They actually did not. Their main focus was on Prime Minister Manley, who, of course, was a political person in power who had been elected, duly elected. And they considered him to be the big problem in Jamaica. In fact, I did not find any active surveillance or reference to Bob Marley at all in 1976 until they put in there's like a daily report that the president receives from the CIA every day about things going on around the world. So in December, after Bob Marley had been shot and went off to the hospital, the CIA records reflect them reading the Jamaican newspaper and basically reporting hearsay of this is what happened. There was this shooting and Bob Marley went to the hospital. It doesn't talk about any activity on their part, but that's where, when I was able to get those documents earlier, it listed the names of these phony diplomats, but real CIA agents. And I found one who was the secretary to the ambassador. That was his fake title. And his real title was chief of station of the CIA, which meant he was the top dog handling this operation. So I located him in the South, we'll say, of the United States, and he's long retired. And first thing I asked him was, is it true that you were the secretary to the ambassador? And he said, yeah. And I said, is it also true that you were acting as the chief of station to the CIA? And he said, well, how can I answer that question without incriminating myself? And
You
I
just
said,
did.
you just did.